What's up, everybody, and welcome to the MASHNDRUM Whiskey Room. Obviously, we're not in the whiskey room. We're somewhere else magical. But what's going on, everybody? Like, subscribe, and make sure you help me keep climbing to that 100,000 subscriber milestone here in 2024 and into 25. Thanks so much for being here. Today, I have a very special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Mason Walker of Bourbon Lore. I figured we'd take the time today to learn a little bit more about Bourbon Lore, and not only learn more, but what he's got coming up in the pipeline, and especially this amazing book, which really kind of talks to my whiskey geekdom, if you will. So Mason, for those of the folks that do not know you, tell us just a little bit about yourself and how this whole, I mean, it's probably a long story, but how this whole rabbit hole started.
We might have to go live for a few hours to get through it, but we'll save that for later. I mean, I think it's important to always have an understanding of where somebody's been, to really understand where they are today, and then to really have a better, consensus of where they'd like to go tomorrow. So,
absolutely.
For me, I've grown up in the American West for 5 generations now of our family being here in Arizona. We came over in the late 1800s and actually homesteaded about a 3,500 acre parcel. And our family's homestead still exists to this day, an old log cabin that one of our great-great-grandfathers built. So always had a connection to the American West. Had a unique upbringing. My mom and dad actually owned an antique shop called Country Emporium Antiques in Tucson, Arizona. So it'd been an antique shop since the 1950s. John Wayne used to shop there. They had actually put a doorbell in the back of the house so he could come in through the back of the...
Wayne, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
I know, right? So it was really unique. It was a super special, I would say, opportunity for me to, for a couple of reasons. Like my bedroom window even looked into the antique shop, right? So, and we specialize in cowboy, kind of some Native American relics, some mining relics, things of the American West, right?
There's something very shocking about John Wayne walking into an antique shop.
Yeah, well,
I like to see that, that chandelier.
The man, the Duke.
Yeah.
But it was cool because in the American West, you had a lot of Westerns that were getting filmed, right? So, and even up into, the 80s and 90s, a lot of commercials like Wells Fargo commercials that would be shooting the stagecoach going through the desert, right? So Country Emporium had been something that was a real love of my mom and dad's. It was connected to our home. And so, every day you were part of the antique shop, right? You were part of these individuals that were coming in to share, in the history or the lore of certain kind of relics that they wanted to find a new home for. So kind of fast forward, I spent a lot of time on cattle ranches, old ghost towns. My dad and I on the weekends would go riding around in the desert to find old mines, the tailings, and we'd tie off on the A-frames and spelunk down in. And
I grew up in New York, so I don't know what the hell he's saying. Just letting you know.
So we gotta help Jay out. This will be the next episode. Who wants to see Jason tie off on an A-frame and spelunk down into a mine shaft somewhere in the deserts of Arizona?
Yeah, you're not throwing me down a mine shaft. I've seen too many movies where people get lost down there.
Hit us up in the comments. I think if we get that to the 100,000 mark, maybe we'll celebrate by taking Jay out.
Maybe.
So, but by having this unique kind of upbringing, it was really special, and I'd say 3 core ways for me. And one is there's this deep appreciation I have for history, for heritage, for legacy. The fact that there's certain chapters that have been written that are absolutely beautiful that should never be forgotten, right? And then second is this deep appreciation for the gift of story, for folklore, right? When you sit in enough, homes over the, kind of that journey of being in the antique shop and hearing people talk about the fact that this wasn't just a saddle made in 1879. It was a saddle that was owned by John Wayne and used in this movie, and friends with their family, and been in their family for 3 generations, and like all of a sudden the lore associated with that saddle made that piece just not something that was to be sold in an antique shop. It all of a sudden created a piece of heritage or history and the lore of the value as much as it was in the actual relic, right?
Yeah, so between your experiences in an antique shop and then, like you said, telling those stories behind it, it's a nice little transition into really what bourbon is.
Exactly.
You mentioned history, you mentioned legacy. So it kind of makes sense how you kind of went down that rabbit hole, and all of a sudden, so what hooked you onto the bourbon side of things?
So I obviously, been around bourbon since I was a kid, right?
Did your dad drink bourbon?
Oh yeah, so like my grandpa, amazing man, one of my best friends. I'd be out with him, and he would always, ask me to make him country pops, which meant that I'd get up into the back of Old Blue, his Silverado, pop open the ice box, get a pop out, pour a little bit of the pop, out, and then he'd teach me how to get in his toolbox, pull out a handle of, Jim Beam, good old white label, and crack that screw top. Pour a little Jim Beam in there, take that pop, shake it up a little bit, and get back to Grandpa. You got a country pop, right? So whenever my Uncle Terry was a wild turkey guy. My dad was for the most part sipping on Jack Daniels, and I would go to, my grandpa had a home in Tombstone, and we'd go to Tombstone. He was served, and so he was a member of the American Legion Hall there, and so I'd go down there as a kid on the weekends with my mom and dad, and they would two-step in country swing at the American Legion Hall. My sister and I would sip on some Shirley Temples, and my grandpa would sip on his Jack Daniels with my dad, right? And so it was always an element to where I would say bourbon was around, right? And then you're in people's homes on these ranches. This other aspect for me was this community piece, right? And I was always amazed that we could meet somebody at a diner or at a feed store, and they'd invite us over to their home and want to share with us some of their relics that they had in the house. And without fail, they were generally pouring something, right? Whether it was a little banquet or a little brown spirit, they were pouring something, and we were going to sit and have a story and maybe even a meal with them. And we were complete strangers an hour ago, but now 2 hours later, we're best of friends, and our families will stay connected for life.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite part of bourbon. I've talked about that, how you can take any group of people, color, creed, religion, political affiliation, whatever it may be, get them in a room with a couple glasses of bourbon, and it doesn't matter what the situations are, their personal situations. You can have a pour with them, get to know them on a one-on-one level,
Exactly.
and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, no, 100%. So
is that what really kind of led to the genesis of Bourbon
yeah,
Lore?
so fast forward, I felt, for me, I want to live this life of authenticity. I want to live a level of intrinsic value in everything that I do. I don't want a transactional life. And so what that meant to me is I really would prefer to have people let's invite them over to the house. I love to barbecue. Let's cook for them. Let's share with them something in the way of a pour, and just get to know them, right? And I was like, I enjoy wine. I love wine. I don't have a deep knowledge base around wine. I've enjoyed Scotch, but I really have been around bourbon, and I feel this personal connection to it, and it's the spirit that I actually prefer to sip myself. And this was 15 years ago, right? And so I told my wife, I was like, Ash, let's do this. Let's invite our docs over. Let's cook for them. Let's pour for them. And I'll bring up some of the relics from the antique shop, and I'll kind of basically blend this love that I have of the American West with this love I have of America's spirit. And sincerely, that was 15-ish years ago.
Wow.
And obviously at that point in time, nobody was necessarily collecting. There wasn't this fandom around bourbon. Well, as things kind of go down the bourbon rabbit hole, the more I learned, the more, because back then there was no, I wouldn't say the community was as strong from a meta perspective or a YouTube perspective as it is today, right? With the amount of knowledge and information.
There wasn't a lot of people, just intrinsically taken with bourbon and wanting to learn more about it. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
And then all these communities were being built, and these groups, and people were sharing and buying and collecting.
100%.
Yeah.
And so it was honestly, you're going to a liquor store, and I remember going to my first liquor store back in 2011, 2012, and I was really serious about wanting to ask questions about bourbon.
Yeah.
And it was they had to ask around. All of a sudden, John in the back that's been there for 30 years, came out, and he shared a little wisdom with me about certain bottles that were there at the store.
It's so funny you say that, because that's kind of how I got into bourbon too.
Yeah.
I had a liquor store friend in New York, this guy in New York who was an older gentleman. He would kind of come out, he's like, oh, the Beam family's been around for generations. And he would kind of give me these little tidbits, which while I was sipping the bourbon kind of sparked my curiosity even more, until I finally went down the rabbit hole like you did. So it's amazing the people in our lives that come along just to kind of, it could be a moment in time that could change things like that.
I just think it's moments like that where that's a gift, that's exciting. I love that sense of kind of curiosity. I love that sense of adventure in my life. And so I think that if you have, an opportunity to share that with others, then you have to do it. And so, I would say, to kind of summarize, my 15 years, I never looked at myself as a collector. I never looked at myself as somebody that was just going to go out and try to find the most expensive bottles and to have them in our home. It was the opposite. I was fascinated about certain chapters of American whiskey. I was fascinated that when I would speak with somebody and they would share with me and talk to me about, pre-pro bottles or post-pro or, mid-century dusties, and I was like, what are all these things? Like, these sound like super cool to me, and I want to know more about it. And so it was a way of life for me. And so when I look at Bourbon Lore, I want to be able to live American whiskey, not just sip American whiskey, which to me means adventures and unique experiences and environments where you get to surprise and delight guests and create these moments where it's like, wow, I can't believe we just had an opportunity to do this, right? That to me is what I'm searching for in building I would say a new iteration of what community means for American whiskey.
Yeah, so me being here, we're here in beautiful, well, this is what, Paradise Valley? This is Paradise Valley, just outside of Phoenix, just outside of Scottsdale. And this event that you put together here this week is all about one thing, this book. So for me, getting to experience some of the experiences that that Mason has put together for this, it's just been incredible. I mean, you have industry insiders, master distillers here, all in celebration of this one common goal of not only celebrating the community, celebrating whiskey and bourbon in general, but also this book that you put together.
Yes.
Quick story. I'm talking to Mason. I don't know, maybe a couple months ago. And he kind of calls me and he tells me, he's like, I have this idea for this book, and I'm going to be putting it together. I would love for you to come out to Phoenix, and we're doing a little bit of a cool event around it. It's going to be a launch. It's going to be a lot of fun. You should come. So he goes. The thing that got me is, he's like, yeah, I was talking to a couple of people. They said, we probably couldn't do this book for another year and a half. He's like, well, I want to do it in 6 months. And here we are. Yeah, so tell me about this book, because again, kind of going back to the bourbon geekdom that I think you and I both have. This book kind of, it's an amazing example of not only your collection and what you've kind of curated over the last several years, but also the stories behind each whiskey and kind of your personal connection with each of those whiskeys. So tell me a little bit about the genesis of this book and why you wanted to put it together so bad.
My wife would like to understand that as well. So hopefully she'll get some value out of this video.
And I'll kind of hold it up here so people can see the cover.
I would say, like, when all of us have been down this, kind of wanting to know and learn more about bourbon, I was just surprised and shocked where it's like you'd hear about certain eras or chapters or distilleries or certain expressions, but it was really no place to go, right? I couldn't even find, I would hear about certain bottles and I couldn't even find a photo of the bottle. And I started naively reaching out to the distilleries and asking to talk to somebody at their visitor center if I could, find a photo, if they have a photo, and where, and they're like, you're calling to ask for a photo of this? I don't even know what that bottle is, right? And so I was always surprised, are these bottles truly lore? Do they exist? I've heard people talk about them. And so for me, when we started to kind of have some of these bottles come into your life, I feel like that's a blessing, right? And, this was, I would say, a passion project that I started thinking about probably around 2019 going into 2020. Because at this point, we've been in healthcare, we've been very blessed to build a beautiful business. I've got an incredible family, and I told my wife in 2019, I was like, Ash, I want to do something. I want to share all these bottles and some of their stories and some of the lore with them. And of course, she's like, great, here we go again, another bourbon project, right? Keep focused in healthcare. This is just distraction. So in 2020, I had a conversation with a buddy of mine named Dan Jansen, who owns Lincoln Design, who's responsible for all the brand design that you see with Bourbon Lore. So shout out to Dan Jansen and the Lincoln Design team. And he's like, Mason, he goes, I love your story. I love your connection to bourbon. You have some awesome bottles. Yeah, let's figure this out. And so he started helping me around what would a brand design for bringing a book like this to life look like. Then he introduced me to Darren Higgins, a professional museum-grade photographer. I think Darren thought this was originally maybe going to be like a 4-week project.
Who I got to meet last night. And he was incredible to talk to. So about just the way he wanted to tell the story about each bottle through a photo, not just not just an ultra modern background, and show some photos here in the B-roll a little bit of what's inside of the book, but it's a beautiful piece.
Just the photography alone in this book to get to these 100 bottles started the first week of January and literally went through almost the end of April, Monday through Friday, from sunup to sundown, Darren in my home with me, trying to ensure that we could capture the essence of these bottles, because I was adamant that I wanted unfortunately a lot of the photos that are on, the internet today are not exactly the real McCoys. You know what I mean? There's a lot of photoshopping, color editing, changing the filters on it.
Yeah, so changing the color of the actual whiskey on the inside.
And I, as a fan, I don't want that, right? I want to see that bottle in its truest form, and that bottle deserves to have its story told based around truly what that liquid looks like, what that what the packaging, and if it's torn, if it's worn, if it's stained. I want all of that to come out, right? And so Darren's like, so you realize that we're gonna have to probably take a lot of images of a bottle to be able to experience that. I was like, well, let's do it. And so we ended up having 9,000 unique images. 9,000.
So how did you get from 300 to 100?
That was a bit
that's like choosing your children.
Yeah, and I got 4 beautiful love bugs, right? So,
because we're not talking, bottles of, Jim Beam Black Label 7-year or a Knob Creek 9-year. These are very rare historic bottles that are in the collection that's highlighted here. And not only that, but my favorite part of it is you tell the story behind each bottle. Yeah. The distillery, the mash bill, and I think that's my favorite part of it.
I literally get a phone call. That was in August. I get a phone call from Clay Risen in August of September 2022, and he was doing a piece in the New York Times around the state of American whiskey, and obviously any of us in the bourbon world, we have his books. He's incredible,
great writer,
right?
Great writer, by the way.
One of the greatest.
Plays one of the best.
And so I was really honored, right? And humbled the fact that somebody I look up to and own his books is featuring me in a piece that he's doing around the state of American whiskey. So that piece came out in December, and then he and I connected again early in 2023 last year. And we started talking a little bit more around his love of American whiskey, my love of American whiskey, and one thing led to another. And I said to him and David Jennings, shout out to Rare Bird 101, I said, why don't you fly down to Scottsdale? Let's have a little bourbon kind of dream team meeting of the minds. And if we were to do something unique and something kind of adventurous American whiskey, what could that look like? What could that be? So after a few hikes, after a few fireside chats and a couple cigars and some great pours later, we're like, all right, we don't exactly know what this is going to be, but let's go for it. So
you never know what it's exactly until it happens, and you're like, okay, we have something here.
So the goal has always been to give back to the community. I am from the community. I am one of the community, right? And so as somebody who still looks at himself as a fan, how do we create something where it's being built by a fan, with fans, for fans, right? And this book, to me, the aspiration and the desire when Clay and I kind of finally sat down and went through it all was, what if we were able to share the story of American whiskey from the last 100 years by outlining certain chapters and eras and certain distilleries that really were defining moments in American whiskey. And so when you think about the last 100 years of how did we get to this incredible place where we are today with what is now bourbon worldwide that we know in this kind of bourbon kingdom, where did it begin, where did it start? But how can we maybe tell the story of those 100 years, of those unique chapters, through certain bottles themselves as the lead characters in the story? And then how do those bottles relate to me as a fan with what they meant when they came into my life, into my journey of who maybe I received that bottle from or who I've shared it with. So
I think, because I think it's a little bit of a mirroring effect when you kind of look through the book and you're going through some of the chapters, because I think a lot of us in the community have those little bit of stories where either they received a bottle that's super rare, whether they stumbled upon it, whether someone got it for them, and how those bottles interconnect with each part. Like you said, they kind of just connect with a specific moment in time, and those bottles always you cherish, and it means so much to you. So some of that is that story in here, and I feel like there's a little bit of the community and all of us in this book, which I really appreciate about it too. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Speaking of creating things, I'm just gonna talk about this a bit. So one of the things that you're doing with Bourbon Lore is not just going and picking barrels, but connecting with specific distilleries. And you've kind of transitioned that into doing some other unique experiences, some other unique bottles with other brands, including this one. Tell me a little bit about this before because we're going to try it, of course.
So two things on, this, I would say this level of passion and excitement around being able to team up with distilleries. One is there's a level of, we want to push the envelope with maybe some of the expressions that they have that are currently in market, with if they were to think a little bit outside of the box, what does outside of the box look like, right? So with Ben Holiday, they were just coming up with their first 7-year distillate. They were excited to potentially do a custom blend, and we maybe went a little aggressive with an 18 barrel. I thought it was a great idea, but not being in the space, they're like, maybe we should have started with a few less barrels. But it was an incredible project and allowed for us to be able to tell the story of, I think, Ben Holiday and do something special with them. So
great distillery, by the way.
Huge
I love the guys at Ben Holiday.
Great team.
I got to pick 2 barrels there, and the experience was second to none.
Right, exactly. And so, I felt honored, and we felt proud as a team that we could help them bring something like that to life. So, our goals, obviously we want to be able to create things for the greater community of whiskey. We also want to be able to create these unique one-of-one kind of experiences that are more limited and intimate with, maybe 15 or 20 or 25 attendees. At those experiences, we'll also have special releases. So we just had this Heaven Hill experience, and we created a unique one-of-one 3-barrel blend. Actually, we ran into each other when we were out there working on that.
I was picking 2 barrels, and then this guy's up front with Connor O'Driscoll making a blend. I'm like, what is happening over there?
So, somebody that has done, I think, something extraordinary with kind of this next iteration of where American whiskey is going, is what the Bardstown Bourbon team is doing. And I'm a big fan of the fact that they are willing to challenge the status quo, push the envelope,
which I think is what Bardstown Bourbon Company has kind of been doing from the beginning,
right?
Yeah.
And so when we started talking to them, around, I would say, the summer, about potentially teaming up and being a part of their collaboration series, it was a real honor for us, and we knew that we wanted to do something special with them. So Green River, which is in the a legendary distillery that's been around for a long time, and we actually have one of their bottles in the book here. This
one of the original bottles,
right? This is one of the original, Green Rivers to ever come to life. Incredible, packaging. I think we look here. It says. The whiskey without a headache, right? The whiskey of nationwide reputation, right? I love that. And so one of the things that we talked about with the Bardstown crew was, have you ever put Green River into a collaboration series release, right? And they said no. And we're like, okay, all right, we've got a special bottle that's going to be in the Bourbon Lore Legends book from Pre-Pro of Green River. Let's do something to where we tie the launch of this book to the launch of this collaboration, and let's bring in an element of the book into this collaboration with Green River. And they came back and said, all right, for the brand design, well, we also want to do a little turquoise because we see your little pop of flair. This is, by the way, my grandfather's. My granny gave it to him in 1974, but.
It's actually the first thing I thought of when I saw the color.
Really?
So I was like, that's a Southwest color. That tracks with Mason. That works. Yeah.
So Emerson Shotwell is part of our Bourbon Lore team, and an incredible friend, and very talented when it comes to our blends. He led this project with David Jennings, as well as Ryan Alves from Justin's House of Bourbon with Dan Calloway. But I think what you will see and find is that there's a strong base in here of tenure that I don't know exactly how much we're allowed to say just yet. With it
Well,
being
you say
released,
it. You say it in code. So you say, the kickin' chicken. You say Schmevin Schmill.
Yeah, exactly.
We know there's a little Green River in there, and there's a couple of little surprises in the blend. But that's how you just kind of talk whiskey code.
I like it. So I'm learning because I didn't realize how sensitive some of these distilleries were. With some of the secret sauce, right?
Yeah.
So I am very, very pleased with this. It is
beautiful
dropping.
bottle. Yep.
It is dropping. Here in Scottsdale this weekend, or tonight actually. So we have Dan Calloway and Mark Irwin from the Bardstown Bourbon family here. It'll be released to our guests here. Next week on Friday, November 15th, we'll be at Bardstown Bourbon Company, their visitor center in Louisville. Beautiful venue. We're going to be dropping 144 bottles there. Clay will be out there, Emerson will be out there, I'll be out there. We're also going to have some books. We'll be doing some book signings. And then it'll go live at bourbonlore.com on Monday, November 18th in the morning. And then it'll go live November 20th with Bourbon Outfitters and Sealbox. So I think you need to have, we don't have a bottle we can open yet because they're literally arriving this morning. But this is Dan's sample that he brought out.
We have a super secret classic bottle, which we all love. Yeah. So I'll pour a little bit here.
I'll take a little.
Should grab a little too. Tell me a little bit about the availability of the book, how this is going to roll out. This is a great coffee table book. I think this should be on every whiskey lover's coffee table. Go through the bottles, the photography. Absolutely love it.
Thank you. And just to give you a little taste of the book, everything here for me was an aspect of this journey that I've been on with Bourbon Lore. So this horse is actually a Winchester Western horse that my dad gave me when I passed my first Arizona Game and Fish hunter education program when I was 12. And it's an old Winchester advertising sign that hung in my bedroom that I always appreciated and valued and really loved as something that my dad had given me. I used to collect shaps when I was a kid. And so, the W on the shaps, it was important to me because I've always had this connection to the shaps. We used to sell old whiskey jugs and just, jugs that we'd find in old cellars around ranches at our antique shop. The upside down horseshoe for Cowboy Good Fortune, right? The corn on the border. I went on my first vision quest when I was 9 years old in the Chiricahua Mountains here, and so I've always had a strong connection to native culture and have some Navajo textile here, right? Bottles that my dad and I used to dig up in old dumps, around Arizona that we'd sell in our antique shop. So just all layers and elements to enrich the experience because I want everything to be not just a standard or typical here's a coffee table book. No, this is a piece of history that we're attempting to write. It's truly one of the first privately held American whiskey collections to be shared in this way. So
it's a story that tells a story.
Beautiful. Cheers, brother.
All right, let's try this. I'm actually getting a lot of old school rye grain on this, which I really dig. Yeah. It almost gets into a little bit of a sassafras combined with cherry type of vibe. I think I do get a little of that. I think I do get a little of that kicking chicken in there.
Yeah. Damn it, Jennings.
It definitely takes you in. I feel like I can taste, if you going by the blend, I feel like it kind of works its way down the blend details.
Right.
You get the kicking chicken aspect in the beginning. You get this really big punch of rye spice in the mid palate. And then I think the oak, and I'm getting just all this candied orange on the back end of it, which is just
well said.
Delicious.
Definitely.
David Jennings, Ryan Alves, you guys did a hell of a job.
Emerson, nice work,
Emerson,
brother.
nice job.
And Dan, we got to throw Callaway in there, of course. Dan did participate.
Yeah, Dan, he kind of knows what he's doing. Yeah, a little sweeter as it goes along too. Gets into a cream soda vibe. That's really good.
I definitely get that cream soda right now.
It's almost effervescent in a way. It's almost like bubbly.
Yeah, second sip, I'm loving that. The other piece that'll be exciting about this is we will have a new Bourbon Lore rarity component that we're going to be excited to start to share. And so for the bottles that'll be received both here in Scottsdale as well as through Bourbon Lore with Bourbon Outfitters and Sealbox, are going to have a unique Bourbon Lore rarity profile that I'll leave as just a little surprise. So make sure to take a look at some of the stickers that might be on the back of the bottle here.
I saw the preview. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
So I'd say for us as Bourbon Lore, this journey is just beginning, right? We, this is a true love and passion of what American whiskey means to the Bourbon Lore family, and wanting to tell the story of the American West through America's spirit. And so there's kind of three core aspects for me that I'm passionate about and what we're wanting to create and bring to life here at Bourbon Lore. One is these unique kind of one-of-one expressions, and so we have some exciting projects for 2025 that I can't wait to share with you. This has been an incredible year for 2024. I am so grateful to these teams at whether it's Ben Holiday or Bardstown Bourbon or Connor Driscoll and the Heaven Hill team. For us out there as fans, know that they want to push the envelope, and it's not necessarily about just premium in the form of a price point. They do want to create premium in the expression as well as in the experience, right? And if Bourbon Lore can be that complement to them and being able to bring some of that to life, then wow, right? How exciting for us, and what an incredible gift for the whiskey community. Stay in touch, please, if you haven't had a chance, go to bourbonlore.com. Register your information. We're going to have newsletters that'll be coming out, and of course,
when it comes to the book, how can viewers possibly get one?
Bourbonlore.com. So you can buy the book on bourbonlore.com, and if for whatever reason you feel the need, you can also go to this place called Amazon.
Big time on the Amazon.
Yeah, we made it right. Yeah. The book will be officially landing here in the U.S. in late November. Shipping for all the pre-sale orders the first week of December. So,
well, Mason, I want to thank you for not only this amazing experience, inviting me here, and this entire group to get together. And I think no matter what journey you are, what part of your journey you're with in bourbon, I can appreciate your passion, your willingness to bring a lot of people in, create experiences like this, to create a book like this. I think anybody that meets you, the energy is infectious, and I think your love of bourbon comes through, and that's something I think anybody can appreciate. So
thank you, brother.
Thank you so much for having me here. Cheers. Thanks for watching The Master and Drum. Check out bourbonlore.com, and I highly recommend ordering one of these books. They're incredible, and watch out for this guy in 2025.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys. See you soon.